We're here, Chairman.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll start agenda item 13. Commission General Regulations Adoption for possible action. Public comment allowed. Persons wishing to provide comment on regulations are requested to complete a speaker's card and present it to the recording secretary. 13A, Commission General Regulation 475 Shed Antlers, LCB File R134-17. Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed for adoption. Public comment is allowed. Chief Turnipseed.
Thank you, Chairman Wallace, members of the commission, Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed for the record. So you guys are all familiar with this regulation and the evolution that it's undergone over the last 10 years that I'm aware of. Started out as a legislative mandate in 2011 when the legislature passed a bill that was very short and sweet, and it just said the commission shall adopt regulations for the taking of shed antlers. It had been discussed several times by this body prior to that, but after that, the legislature sort of stepped it up a little bit that said the commission shall adopt. Drafted a regulation just before I became chief, and this board tossed it around for a while, passed it, but it failed to pass its final round of approval at the state legislative commission. The reason they cited was they wanted to see a private lands exemption. We wrote that into it, but this board did not bring it back to their agenda for a couple years. That regulation expired, and then, of course, last year we had the tough winter. Utah had their emergency antler closure. We got pounded with antler hunters on the eastern side of the state, so we were asked to draft it back up again, and this time drafted it prior to the November meeting just for the 3 counties of Elko, White Pine, and Lincoln, to say that that shed antlers would be closed to gathering from January 1st to April 14th. After the November workshop, this board changed it to say to include the 3 counties that were worried about spillover from the 3 initial counties. So the current draft specifies Elko, Eureka, Lander, Lincoln, Nye, and White Pine counties. But I believe if I understood the motion correctly, the board wanted to hear from those 3 additional counties, Lander, Eureka, and Nye, to hear if their cabs had an appetite for it or not. So the way it's currently drafted says a person shall not take or gather shed antlers from or on any public land located in Elko, Eureka, Lander, Lincoln, Nye, or White Pine counties at any time from January 1st through March 31st inclusive, or between the hours of sunset and 10 a.m. from April 1 to May 31st inclusive. Those hunting hours, I realize, were a little bit confusing, especially to a lot of the cabs, but I believe that was in consideration of sage grouse who were on their leks, in the morning time of April and May. So that's where the hours of 10 a.m. came from. It's pretty short and sweet, but I'd stand for questions if there are any.
Vice Chairman Johnston.
I guess I just have one brief comment or clarification. I think we wanted to hear not only from the cabs who were included in the regulation, but those who were not. There was some concern that maybe counties who were not included in the regulation might want to be, and so it was wanting to hear from them as well.
Further questions for Chief Turnipseed? Commissioner East?
There, I think that's on. Tyler, can you remind me why we included March in this March 1 through 31?
As far as the time that it's closed? Mm-hmm. Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed for the record. And yeah, that was just because, if we were to make a generalization about when our big game animals are on their critical winter range and are vulnerable, suffering the effects of late winter, March is still a little bit part of that. By April, I think they've primarily dispersed and moved back up into mid-range habitats, but the critical months of being January, February, March, when they're under the most stress, the most difficulty trying to push through a tough winter. Of course, there was a lot of conversation about whether or not the closure should include January because of late cow season hunts, chucker hunts, that sort of stuff. But February and March, those are months that would have a lot of shed hunting pressure, but also have a lot of pressure on the animals trying to survive that winter period.
Okay, thanks.
Further comments or questions from the commission? Okay. Seeing none, I'll take it out to public comment in Reno.
For the record, Paul Dixon. Let me get myself organized here so I can talk about shed antlers. Shed antlers tend to be something that has, at least at my cab, been something that has imbibed a lot of discussion. And when I say a lot of discussion, I mean Commissioner Valentine was there once. I mean, we spent probably an hour on it in a 3.5-hour meeting. And this last time, I'm sure we spent close to half an hour, even though I tried to cut it shorter. Having said that, we ended up with a split vote, which was a 4 to 2 to 1. One person abstained. But I think the thing that we thought would be valuable to add to the shed antler regulation as written, and this is to kind of, it's always been my opinion that if you have stake in something you're doing, if you're paying for it or you're doing something, you have a greater responsibility. So if you change the very first thing under section 1A to only a person with a valid Nevada hunting license shall take, gather, shed antlers from or on any public land, and then follow. The reasoning being is that if you had a valid Nevada hunting license, whether you were from out of state or in state, you're paying to harvest or take some of that resource versus people who come in commercially that don't have a valid Nevada hunting license, and then they're taking a resource from our state that they're not contributing to. So that would be the only change that we put on the shed antler, was to say that if you had that, and then if you look at it, if there's a parent or a grandparent that takes his grandson out, if he has a valid hunting license, the child doesn't have to have one. So it really doesn't impact anything other. We have the seasons and stuff, but it really doesn't impact anything along those lines. And the only question I had is why January 1st? We have elk hunting until January 31st in many areas. Why would we have shed hunting restrictions starting on January 1st? And so I'll leave that as an open question that you guys can ponder. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Question for Mr. Dixon. You said the vote was 4-2-1, but I don't think you identified what the vote was. The 4 voted.
The vote was, for the record, Paul Dixon back in. The vote was to change Section 1's thing to basically say only a person with a valid Nevada hunting license. The dissenting opinions felt that there was no scientific evidence to say that shed antler collecting was impacting our herds. We don't have any data to say that we've had herd decline or detriment. There's been nothing shown other than anecdotal. And they believe that current wildlife harassment laws are sufficient to deal with people who are out riding ATVs, getting off-road, or doing other things. Sorry. Thank you, Brad.
For the record, Corey Lytle, Lincoln Cab. We support the regulation. I don't have to go too much into detail on that. The change we did want to make, though, is to kind of drive it back to what the original language was, and that's the middle of April. And I have April 15th on our action report. That's basically what the motion was and what the vote was. So we just we want to change the March 31 end date to April 15th to reflect the original proposed language. And then the April 1 date would then be April 16th for the time restrictions. Just to kind of spin off what Mr. Dixon just said, you know, I understand there's not a lot of science behind this yet. There's harassment science. There's all kinds of science that you know, is written when you displace animals from where they are. There's an impact. 2/3 of it's just common sense. I know it may not directly impact herds right now. It may not directly impact sage grouse right now, but it will. By the time we try to specifically address certain scientific studies for, you know, shed antler hunting, you know, 4 more years will go by. The problem will get worse. The impacts are there. This restriction is not going to stop everybody from doing it. It's going to kind of curtail some of the abuses, some of those things. It's really a good thing, and it needs to happen. We support it.
Thank you, Corey.
Good morning, members of the commission, Mr. Chairman. Rob Beamer, Chairman of the Carson City County Advisory Board. We certainly recognize that we're not part of the counties that would have this restriction, but I felt it necessary to let the commission know that we did have 3 individuals that were fathers from, fathers of families who make it a point every year to go out into the field in these counties during their spring break, their kids' spring break, and engage in shed hunting as well. I did take the opportunity to kind of educate them a little bit and forward them all to the testimony that's been given over the last number of years, and some of the video presentations and pictures and stuff that we have gotten to see that totally supports this. And for the record, the Carson City County Advisory Board did absolutely unanimously support this as written. Those 3 families were just a little concerned that they wouldn't be able to go out and do that anymore with their families. And I said, well, I'll certainly pass that on to the commission just for process. But we certainly understand where the department as well as the commission may be going with this. And their thought was that, if you take out March out of the picture, then that takes out their kids' spring break and all that stuff. And one thing I did want to bring to your attention is, as was mentioned earlier, is there's multiple states that are certainly enacting regulation on shed hunting. Colorado is one of the newest ones that actually created a license, right, for shed hunting. And I would absolutely we absolutely would support Mr. Dixon's and the Las Vegas Cab's opinion of making it mandatory that you have to have a Nevada hunting license in order to engage in that, right? We're taking a resource away from the state of Nevada. Everybody should participate in the compensation for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Further public comment?
Jesse Weller, Lyon County Cab Chair. We as a county understand that there is an issue. We don't consider ourselves directly affected as not being one of the counties listed. So we all did agree that we felt that it was inclusive to the counties and would apply directly to them. We don't feel that we need to be included. We also understand that there is a need for change in regulation due to the abused wildlands when chasing shed antlers. Primarily off-road vehicles and the difficulties in regulating that. I'm kind of curious in how we work with BLM in order to enforce regulations we already have. We also see some things that don't really align as far as mentioned earlier, hunting season going into January. And we were also, we did vote unanimously to restrict shed antler hunting from January 1st to March 31st. And we also voted unanimously to have no restrictions on the daylight hours as far as antler hunting. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment in Reno?
Morning. Steve Marcus, White Pine County. We actually got on social media and advertised and put the word out on our cab meeting Tuesday, and we had the biggest crowd we had for years, and we got a lot of input. It went really well, and it was voted on by basically everybody in the room that we would prefer to go with the recommendation of the commission. And the only thing we were wanting to change was the 15th instead of the 31st. It does have an impact. Deer have been dropping their antlers out there. Already we have an influx of people shed hunting. 5 trucks on the Cleveland bench last weekend, already impacting the deer. The deer were at 9,500 feet, which was good that we had not had any snow. They were able to get up there away from the people. But it has begun already this year. So just letting you know that. Thank you.
No, Marcus, real
Yes.
quick, on your 15th, are you talking March 15th or are you talking the April 15th, like Lincoln County?
Like Lincoln County.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Further public comment in Reno? Okay, seeing no further public comment in Reno, I'll take it to Las Vegas for public comment.
Yes, we have comment, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Mark Edgel, 5645 West Alexander Road, Las Vegas, Nevada. I had an opportunity to read this. I see it's pretty vague. I mean, if a guy's out there looking for, just out tooling around in the woods and you pick up some antlers, and then you have a late hunt, like it's been pointed out, and then later in January, and you get pulled over, you're breaking the law, and you don't even mean to. Or if you do not take the antlers out of your truck immediately, you could be cited. I'm just pointing out that it's pretty vague. I think it needs to be tightened up a little bit. I certainly would endorse the hunting license thing. I hope we would never incur more fees on top of it. It's already tricky enough to remember to come February, your hunting license is going to expire and you need to buy another one. So that's kind of tricky there too. If you're out hunting in March 1st or 2nd and you haven't bought your new license, are you breaking the law? So it's pretty vague. I'd encourage you to tighten it up. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment in Las Vegas?
No further comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So with that, I'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion or a motion at this point, I guess. Commissioner Barnes.
Yeah, a couple things. I was one that wanted to see the actual vote.
Flip your mic, Tom, and see if it came on.
Okay, I think good now. All right. This topic actually came up at a cattleman's board meeting, and it was brought forward for 2 reasons. The primary reason was because the resource, the ground, was getting torn up by shedhorn hunters getting out there as early as they could in wet ground and cutting deep ruts all over everything. And then, of course, with the animals. So I was actually looking for a May 1 or the April 30th date. That way it gives the ground kind of a chance to firm up. In Elko County, you know, a lot of places, those does are in their the 3rd trimester of pregnancy. And, you know, they've been through a hard winter, and they really haven't had any chance for any green up. And usually by the middle to the end of April, they've had a chance for 2 weeks of green up to get a little strength and to kind of move off of those ranges. So there's less, obviously a lot less pressure on those animals, and it's, you know, it's giving them a little better chance. So I really think the end of March, at least, especially in Elko County, is way too soon. You know, I could go with the middle of April date, but my preference would be the end of April. I also have some concerns over the hours. I thought, you know, I know we're looking out for sage grouse, but at some point, are we setting precedent to affect some other users out there? If we start with regulating when the shedhorn hunters can be out there, what about, you know, the recreationists that are just out there? So and, you know, I really hate creating regulation, and so with the hours, we are creating more. So that's a question that I have on the hours, and obviously what I would like to see on the dates, but I think that definitely we have to do something, because it's getting to the point, it's being detrimental to everything. Resources, animals. I guess those are my comments for right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Barnes. And Chief Turnipseed, I have a quick question on the requirement of a hunting license. Is that something that we can do?
Thank you, Chairman Wallace, and I may refer to our Deputy AG on this one, but my initial reaction would be that a lot of the cabs brought that up, and it probably is a good discussion down the road, but I'm not sure it would be covered under this agenda item.
Language. The problem is it would trigger if you make that change, it's fairly significant. It would have to go back to the Legislative Council Bureau. They'd have another 30 days to review it. And then I think you'd have to bring it back and adopt it with that language in there after LCB review.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Stockton. And one other question I have that Commissioner Barnes brought up, as far as the hours of between 10 a.m. and sunset and 10 a.m., if we change that date to April 15th, would that alleviate any of the sage grouse implications, or is that just in general for sage grouse, that was where that number came from?
Thank you, Chairman Wallace, and I hate to speak for Game Division staff, so I don't know if they want to address that one or not, but I guess philosophically, yeah, it seems like pushing the closure date a little bit later might make up for a little bit of the, the hours argument as well.
If I could I have Sean Espinoza come up, because it is a major topic with him and a bunch of our game biologists throughout the state, so maybe he could give you some clarification.
Okay.
Sean Espinoza, for the record, Upland Game Staff Specialist with the Department of Wildlife. So as I'm thinking about this in my mind, listening to the conversation, a May 1st opening date, I guess, if you will, if anything before that, really a timing restriction wouldn't be necessary. So the peak of attendance for males is usually around that first week in April. And the nesting season really extends through the month of April and into May a bit, and then drops off pretty dramatically after that. So if you made it a May 1st opening, you wouldn't have to consider a timing restriction after that point. But April 15th, you're still right in the middle of nesting season. And so disturbance during that period with off-road users and things like that would be of concern.
Thank you, Sean. Commissioner Almberg, did you have something for Sean?
So, Sean, if we put the hour restrictions from April 15th to May 1st, that would cover it?
I think if you made that opening date May 1st, you wouldn't have to deal with the timing restrictions. If it was still April 15th, I still think the timing restrictions would be in order.
Correct. So through April 15th through May 1st, we still would, if we open it up in general, we would have to have a restriction, the hour restriction through 15th through May 1st.
I think I would be comfortable with that, particularly given, some of the restrictions that are in place with the BLM for certain activities and the Forest Service. Timing restrictions are being imposed on other uses of the land. So I think we want to try and be consistent with that and put our best foot forward with that. So we're showing deference to sage grouse needs.
Thank you, Sean. Any further questions for Sean before he? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Vice Chairman Johnston.
I just wanted to share I received a telephone call from former Commissioner Pete Morai on this topic, and one of his things that he shared with me was a concern over the 10 a.m. time restriction? And how would that play into when people drive on various roads, waiting for them, to the extent in this time period you're still having freeze thaw? His preference was let people drive out when the roads are frozen rather than after 10 a.m. And my thought was well, I don't think this time restriction prevents you from driving out, much like the hunting time starts at a specific period of time, but people are often driving out well before that to get wherever they want to be. But I guess one way to eliminate this factor would just have the closure from January 1st to April 30th. That, from what I heard from Mr. Espinoza, addresses the sage grouse issue. We eliminate the complexity of this start time, and you just have a regulation that prohibits the gathering or taking of shed antlers in the specified counties from January 1st through April 30th. And that's a very simple regulation. It addresses public comment that we heard in Las Vegas, at least, with respect to some complexity there. I also heard about the hunting seasons, and I turned back and flipped through the season schedule from last year and the proposed this year. You know, there's generally not that many seasons that go into January. They're pretty few and far between. So I don't think there's a huge number of people out in January with tags. There are some, but I think where I'm coming down would be just to simplify the regulation to create a prohibition that just is from January 1 to April 30th and do away with subsection 2. That's also, I think, very consistent with what we're hearing from Lincoln and White Pine counties, where they'd like to go beyond the March 31st. And I suspect that neither White Pine or Lincoln County are going to have much objection to going out a little 15 more days on the closure.
Further comments or questions? Commissioner Allenberg.
On our proposed season regulations on the cow elk hunts, because that comment got brought up multiple times about why are you doing that when you're still allowing cow hunting going beyond January 1st. But I believe with the proposed season dates, we're the ending date, the last elk hunt date is now going to be January 4th. And so you could, get rid of that argument by making the start date, the first closure date the same, January 4th instead of January 1. It's only a couple days, but that would get rid of that argument, I believe.
Further comments from the commission? Commissioner Valentine.
I tend to agree with Commissioner Johnston on this, and I guess one of the questions in my mind is if this is approved now, when will it go into effect, Tyler?
That's a good question, Commissioner Valentine. It wouldn't actually legally go into effect until the Legislative Commission approves it. They don't schedule their meetings until they've got enough regulations to speak to. My guess is that would be sometime in February or March, but that's strictly a guess. So then we'd be in a little bit of a question of, do we go ahead and roll this out, even though it would go into effect in the middle of the closure time? And I guess my answer to that would be, we would ease into it gently. We're not going to rush out this first year and scratch a bunch of tickets, especially since right now our winter seems fairly mild. If it were enacted during the middle of the season closure, we'd probably take a more aggressive stance next year with it, but go into it softly this year.
Further comments or questions from the commission? Motions? Commissioner Barnes?
Okay, I'll attempt to make a motion. I move to accept Commission General Regulation 475, Shed Antlers, LCB file number R134-17, to read, a person shall not take or gather shed antlers from or on any public land located in Elko, Eureka, Lander, Lincoln, Nye, or White Pine counties at any time from January 1 to April 30.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Barnes and a second by Vice Chairman Johnston to adopt, where did it go here? Commission General Regulation 475, LCB file R134-17, as read by Commissioner Barnes, would now say a person shall not take or gather shed antlers from or on any public land located in Elko, Eureka, Lander, Lincoln, Nye, or White Plain counties at any time from January 1st to April 30th. Is that correct? Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously, 7-0, with Commissioner Hubbs and Young still absent. So we will close agenda item 13A and move to agenda item 13B. Commission General Regulation 440, Trail Cameras and Other Devices, LCB file number R012-16, Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed, adoption, public comment allowed. Chief Turnipseed.
Thank you, Chairman Wallace, members of the commission. Again, Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed. I've got a short PowerPoint here that is a little bit of a review from last time, but tried to incorporate the changes that this body voted on after the November, or at the November workshop. So this is similar to the sheds. You guys all remember the background information on this. We've been discussing it for probably about 10 years as well. And as we discussed at the November meeting, it was sort of a degrees of magnitude problem. When trail cameras first came out, it seemed like it was primarily a parent, you know, who would maybe take kids out on the weekend to check their cameras. People had 2 or 3 cameras. It was a small scale and didn't seem to be a problem. In fact, it was probably a good thing. Get kids involved in the outdoors and see some cool wildlife sightings that came into cameras and that sort of stuff. As was also presented by some of the NGO memberships, they were a great tool in developing water developments. You know, you can see this picture right here, the spacing of the rail fences. That spacing of those rail fences was developed because of trail cameras watching how animals came in and out of guzzlers. You know, the design of the drinkers, the design of the tanks, a lot of that stuff was developed by the use of trail cameras. But fast forward 20 years and here we are seeing scenes like this where this is from this summer in Lincoln County, a guzzler that's got 32 cameras on it. And we've got several of these photos. Again, Lincoln County, 17 cameras still there in October. This one's also in Lincoln County. I don't recall how many cameras are in this picture, but it looks more like a camera farm. There's 5 cameras on a tree. And then a lot of our guide and outfitting industry is now revolving around cameras. I don't know who this one is, but I counted in this photo there are 90 brand new cameras in this box, or in boxes still there. There's another outfitter with 64 cameras that they say is in their first batch ready to go out. We've heard stories of outfitters putting out over 300 cameras nowadays. And so fast forward to 20 years and that's the situation we're looking at. That's a lot different than the parent taking out kids to look at 2 or 3 cameras. We talked about this in November as well. Some of the websites that have popped up looking to capitalize on trail camera information and sell wildlife locations. It's probably a discussion for another day about selling wildlife locations, but this is one of the websites. Here's another one, advertising animals where you can purchase the location information of that animal. So the regulation as we drafted it prior to the November workshop, I tried to summarize here, basically just said, shall not place, maintain, or use a trail camera, number 1, in a way that prevents or alters access to the water. Number 2, within 200 feet of a spring, water hole, or artificial water basin from August 1st to December 31st. In that context, I did bring up the discrepancy that the NRS that talks about camping on a water hole calls it out at 100 yards. So it was a little bit inconsistent, this 200-foot language. And then at any place, it would be illegal to place, maintain, or use a trail camera at any place, regardless of the distance from water, from August 1st to December 31st, if the camera is capable of transmitting. So at the November workshop, you'll recall there was a lot of discussion as to whether this went far enough, and I believe the motion that came out of it can be summarized here. person shall not place, maintain, or use a trail camera or similar device. And as you can see, this language is much tougher. It goes a lot further, has a lot more teeth to it than the original draft. First, in a way that prevents or alters wildlife access to water. Secondly, within 300 feet of a spring, water source, or artificial water basin at any time of the year. So that would be a year-round exclusion to not have cameras on water. And then same thing for year-round. Person shall not place, maintain, or use a trail camera anywhere or anytime if it's a transmitting camera. Essentially what that would do is completely outlaw transmitting cameras. And then at any place, regardless of water, from August 1st to December 31st. That would essentially outlaw any use of cameras from August 1st to December 31st. So as you can see, this language goes a lot further than the original draft. Expectedly, it did generate a lot more public comment, this language going a lot further with it. So I'm sure you guys looked through that. There was a lot more comment than we got in November when the language was a little softer. There are some exceptions or exemptions that are also a little bit controversial, and those were put in there for various groups wanting their piece of the exemption pie. The first being agency folks and industry employees. The agency folks would be in the form of, doing some sort of research, that water development type stuff, surveying animals, BLM looking at horses or us looking at animals using water. That would be an exemption. The industry employees part came in large part from the Nevada Mining Association. They asked for if we could put an exemption in there for mining when they're monitoring a water source on a mine site, especially if it's a toxic water source, monitoring those to see if there's wildlife coming into them. Put the caveat on there that those would need to be marked with who owns the camera. The second part there was language that came out of the November workshop, any person who uses the camera in consultation with the department. It's a little bit vague. I'm not sure I'm in love with that language, but where it came from was that in the initial draft, we had put in an exemption for a wildlife conservation organization who's using them to monitor wildlife use of a water development. It was a little bit of a shout out to some of the NGOs in the past who used cameras a lot to document how wildlife is using those water developments. The language that came out of the November workshop was that right there. Person who uses the camera in consultation with the department. I believe how it's actually worded in the reg is that an employee of an industry, that's the first part, or any other person who uses the trail camera or similar device in consultation with the department. I guess I like the philosophy of that, but I'm not sure what that looks like. I don't know if that would be a written permit or if we need to specify that, put sideboards on it, but it seems a bit vague to me, the consultation with the department. Next exemption, private property with the permission of the landowner, simply because felt like this body probably is not in the business of telling private landowners what they can and cannot do on their own property. So we put the private property exemption in there. And then the last one, cameras used to monitor livestock use of a water source when that water source has a permitted stock water right on it. There again, sort of similar to the permission of the landowner exemption, felt like there could be water sources on public land that a rancher has a right to that water and probably therefore should have a right to monitor the use of that water, whether it's from his own livestock or wild horses, that sort of thing. So that's a little bit of a summary of the language, how it changed from November to now. And I always put this Boone and Crockett topic up there about pursuing gadgets rather than hunting skill. But I would stand for questions, and I guess, as far as my own unsolicited opinion, I've felt like for a long time we've needed to do something about trail cameras, just wasn't sure how far it needed to go. And hopefully we can bite it off in small pieces and not go too far. But I think when we see the difference between a person having a couple cameras that are out a couple months a year versus somebody having 300 cameras out covering every water source and several hunt units, seems like there needs to be something we could do. So I'd stand for questions.
Questions for Chief Turnipseed? Vice Chairman Johnston?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I had, in reading through this prior to this meeting, after the workshop, the in consultation, the same concern or issue that you already raised. I mean, what does that mean? I mean, if someone writes a letter to the department and says, I'm going to use trail cameras to monitor use of a water development that our organization did. They've consulted or at least advised the department. And so I don't know, but what is the department's feeling on that? Does it want to have the right to approve, disapprove? I mean, consultation I can consult my doctor and not listen to the doctor. But I've consulted with the physician. So I think that language is a bit too loose. Do you have an alternative, since you had the same concern? Not to put you on the spot, but
yeah, thank you, Vice Chairman Johnston. I agree. Consultation seems a little vague. You know, I don't want that to just be a person calling up a field biologist who lives in Duckwater and saying, hey, I'm going to go put out 5 cameras. Have a nice day. At the same time, I hate to always say, well, we should have a new written permit, you know, the SLAP process. I don't know if Chat wants to speak to that from the license office or Deputy Director Rob, but I hate to always come up with a new special permit, but I guess I would like to see some sort of written documentation of what that consultation was, you know, who signed off on it, what benefits is it going to give, is it likely to be used for someone's benefit in a hunt, that sort of stuff, so that there's a paper trail that goes with it.
Commissioner Valentine?
I guess in regards to this issue, and I think it was one of the issues that I brought up, but, you know, I believe this exception is necessary, but I think it should be permitted. Consultation and permitted by the department. And I hate to kick the ball over to the department side, but I don't think it would be a big issue for an organization such as Fraternity of Desert Bighorn to go through a process where they actually attain a permit from the department to install a camera on a project at a location for such and such a date from outside of the closed times.
If that's the direction of the commission, the department will figure out how to keep up and come up with a permitting process that will get us there.
Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are permits for take of non-game species that are already out there. I mean, it seems to me like it, and I don't know if this was the context that was brought up in before, but there might be an existing process. It wouldn't take too much to tie into. I don't know. Maybe that's just a modification of that existing system.
Certainly doable.
Further questions or comments from the commission? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Turnipseed. We'll take it out for public comment in Reno on agenda item 13B.
You got to be quick. You knew it was coming. Joe Crim, Persian Cab. At our cab meeting, we voted to not support this regulation as it's presented. We thought that the camera issue was not an issue for the whole state. It was only in select areas of the state. So we'd rather see the regulation based around where the problems are, not the whole state have to pay for a couple of areas that are having issues. And on a personal note, you've heard me say this before when I've said in here that my son did a project with those cameras when he was in high school. He did a project for 3 years. He presented that project internationally 2 years in a row. I also want to see some consensus of some kind where somebody can still do a project through high school or some kind of club or something, whatever it is, whatever the case may be, so it doesn't limit those people so they cannot do a project. So I just want to make sure you're cognizant of what you could be limiting people to when you enforce a new regulation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. The Carson City Advisory Board to Manage Wildlife voted unanimously to support this, but we would like the commission to consider, based on testimony given by one of our local archery organizations, the Clear Creek Bowmen, multiple members of that that group came to our meeting and gave testimony. They would like to petition the commission to consider revising this to include the month of July as well. And the main reason for that, they gave first-hand account of multiple times where guides or rifle hunters or other folks that might be setting up trail cameras come in while their hunt is actually going on and disrupt that hunt. And so they're pretty adamant about that, and I promised them I would relay that to the commission as well, that if you could consider adding July into that. I know here we're getting even a little bit more strict in this, but I think sometimes they brought up a good point. You know, sometimes I think that we disregard the archery group just because they are a smaller group, right? But we lose sight of the fact that the tools that they're using to harvest, right, are short-range tools. And so with that, I take any questions.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman, Commission, Paul Dixon, for the record. I'll say in a 6-to-1 vote that we supported the regulation, and we had a couple of suggested changes or recommendations for you to consider. One is that the reason why we have transmitting cameras restricted is we feel that there's a fair chase issue, and you guys, and everybody agrees with that. But if you're not in the hunting season, August 1st through December 31st, what is the reasoning for not having a transmitting camera? So our recommendation was to lose the transmitting camera clause 1 or C, because if you've restricted it during the hunting season, that's when you have the fair chase issue. Outside of the hunting season, why are we worried about a fair chase issue was the discussion we had at our cab, number one. Number two, is that if, in fact, you guys talked about getting permits or something from the Department of Wildlife, I believe that what's not in this regulation is that you're going to have some way of identifying either a tag number, a permit number for people that have the right to have a camera out there, so that when law enforcement officials go into the field and they see a camera somewhere, it'll either have a permit number on it or it won't. And if it doesn't have a permit number, then it's probably illegally put out there. But if it has a permit number, then they know that it's something that's been permitted by the department and they don't have to worry about it. But my guess is if you're going to have exemptions, you're going to have a way of identifying who has exemptions in the field for law enforcement. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
For the record, Corey Lytle, Lincoln Cab, we support the regulation. Similar to what Chief Turnipseed brought up, we just recommended in section 2.4, we would just remove the language in consultation with, and we suggested something like replace it with consent from, and we're all on the same page there. It sounds like everybody's going to try to figure out how to word that. Side note, we certainly appreciate some of the counties that aren't directly affected with this. I can definitely see where Joe's coming from. And I can also see where some of these other cabs have concern about those dates, the July 1 date or the July 15th date. So I understand that. We support it as written, but if you guys need to modify a couple of things, we're okay with it.
Mel Belding, Washoe County. I appreciate Chief Turnipseed saying the stuff about the NGOs and how much we've learned from these cameras on completely redesigning the way we look at guzzlers, the way they're built, the way drinkers are built. If we never had a drinker, if we never had a camera, access to one, if you ever witness what happens to a lamb when it gets into a small drinker, like in some places that are still used, it should be outlawed, and they get rammed out of there, you would see why we started building drinkers a lot bigger. You would also see why we, for 2 years, another gentleman, and I won't mention his name, but he's not here, but for 2 years we looked at the height of a rail on a guzzler to see how low we could make that to keep some things out to where we would not impede the egress of these animals around there. I want to bring something else up, though. I appreciate that. Thanks, Tyler. I want to say something else. I've been called by this department many times and by the BLM to go find the culprit, either a goat or a domestic sheep. If you force me, and first of all, the areas that these happen in, I know it pretty well. I know a lot of the water, and a camera is nothing more than a tool. And I take this trail camera. I will say now, in all honesty, I've never set a camera for any hunting purposes whatsoever. But I have put them for hunting these domestic sheep and goats, and I've done it several times. And I get calls sometimes when I'm on my cell phone when I'm between Via and Cedarville to go do these things. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, I've been called the night before to go find 11 sheep that got loose off of a ranch in Humboldt County. And Mel, who's using red paint to mark their sheep? Who's using green paint to mark their sheep? Mel, can you call Mr. Estelle or Mr. Espiel and tell him he's got a ram loose on 447? And I don't understand why I need the permission to set a trail camera for me to educate myself, number one, or to do a job that I'm asked to do to try to find the culprit. I think that this is something that you should look at. I ask you to do it and look at it per region or per county. But I think if we have that, and I see it as a big problem, I honestly do, in Lincoln County and maybe White Pine County. I mean, Lincoln County has been brought up a lot. But I think it should be a regional thing. I think you guys should take a look at what you did with the shed hunting and do the same thing with these trail cameras. Thank you.
Thank you, Mel.
Jesse Weller, Lyon County Cab. We voted unanimously to restrict the use of trail cameras during the hunt season, August 1st, January 1st. Regardless of distance, we feel that with a 200, 300-foot mark, the perimeter is still going to be stacked with cameras. Guys are still going to be walking up to water, checking tracks, and we just think in regards to fair chase, sportsmen as a whole, we voted that we would not prefer to see the use of trail cameras during the hunting season. As far as the off-season, we voted unanimously to enable sportsmen and those alike to use trail cameras on water as currently allowed. After speaking with some biologists, those animals are still going to come into water, and if they're not going to come into water during the daytime, if they're being checked in the middle of the summer, they're going to still come into water at night. So as far as the off-season, we would like to see the Lyon County Cab voted unanimous to see use of trail cameras allowed on water during the off-season.
Thank you, Jesse.
Rex Flowers speaking for myself. I'd like to be more county specific. And beyond that, I'm looking at that regulation. You're outlawing cameras anywhere for any use for 5 months of the year, which tells me you must think that they're detrimental to wildlife. They're creating the barriers where wildlife can't get to water sources and such. But you can't use that camera even in a rock outcropping someplace else to look at pikas or bobcats going in and out of their dens. I think it's an overreach. You are trying to encumber the general public. If these cameras are that detrimental to wildlife, why do you allow people to hunt on those water holes? You can't camp on them. Now you can't use a camera on them. This goes a lot further, and I wish you give consideration to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rex.
My name is Carl Urquiaga, and I live in Churchill County, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity today. First of all, I'd like to say these are my own personal viewpoints, not anyone else's. I'm not a member of a cab, and this is not related to anyone else. I use trail cameras as a hobby. I also sometimes use them as part of my hunting hobby. But I've used them with my granddaughters. They're homeschooled, and their mother is very creative and thinks it'd be a great idea if they went with Papa out to check trail cameras and learn about wildlife. And I tend to agree. I've got trail cameras out right now. I live near the Carson River in Churchill County, and my neighbors claimed they saw a mountain lion on the river. So we put out some trail cameras. Haven't caught the mountain lion on the camera yet, but catch all kinds of other interesting and fun things. And that's the big part, is it's a fun hobby. And I'm not talking about the 32 cameras. When I first heard that, it was 31. Now it's 32. The other day I heard it was 40. I don't know how many it is, but it's ridiculous. I agree. But I don't think it's a camera problem. I think it's an outfitter or a hunter problem. It's an ethic problem. I don't think you're going to regulate that away. I think this is a good non-consumptive use of wildlife. I agree with Mr. Flowers on the part about trail cameras anywhere, anytime during that time period. I put trail camera on my camp oftentimes to see if anybody comes in tampering with anything. I know of an entire elk camp in Idaho that was stolen this year. I'm not hearing that I could put that on my camp. I'm not hearing that I could put it out, as he said, to photograph pikas or lizards out in Dixie Valley or something like that. That seems, I could live with the November, pre-November ruling on that. I also agree that I don't like transmitting trail cameras. I don't believe trail cameras affect the wildlife. Maybe when there's 30, when there's 2 or 3, I can show you pictures of bull elk in a wallow in front of the camera. I can show you a picture of bull elk looking into the lens, rubbing his posterior on the camera. I can show you pictures of young mountain lions playing on the guzzlers in front of the camera while there was 2 or 3 cameras on the waterhole. Is there evidence that the trail camera themselves affects the wildlife? I don't believe there is. The people who go and check, yes. You're still going to have people going and checking tracks. That was just mentioned a minute ago. That's the most common human beings I get on trail cameras, is people going and checking tracks. They drive up, they go inside the fence, they check tracks. Generally, they relieve themselves, maybe leave some trash behind and leave. It's not the camera guy. You never get a picture of a guy catching or checking his cameras, because he goes up and covers everybody else's camera. On the other hand, it'd be legal for me to sit in a blind near a water hole, personally be there and take pictures from that. A guide could pay his person to go out there and do that. Let's see. I can honestly say I've only killed 1 animal I ever had on trail camera. That was an antelope. I don't believe the trail camera gave me an advantage over that animal. It only told me that occasionally he comes into that water hole to drink. And I happened to be patient enough to let the other animals go by until he came in. A lot of people won't admit to that they ever killed an animal. I'm not going to apologize for it. I'd like to know if there's what authority the department has to place trail cameras, or to make it illegal to place trail cameras out on federal public land. We've got 45 million acres out there of federal public land. This has nothing to do with the take, in my opinion. I just don't know whether where there's the authority, where it's derived from.
Hey, Carl, I hate to interrupt you, but you've reached your 3-minute time period.
I apologize. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you.
Mike Cassidy speaking as a member of the general public. I'm part of the evil empire. I work for the mining industry, and there are mining claims out there where there are hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment, and it's not private land. It's strictly a mining claim. And to put a trail cam on to monitor people interfering or coming in and tampering with your equipment, even if it's a transmitting camera, so you can sit back and get it and say, oh, there's somebody out there, I better get out there tomorrow to check my equipment, check access. I think it's a valid use of a transmitting trail cam. I think you guys are way overstepping your bounds to let me monitor.
How about people that are illegally dumping trash? If I want to go out and set up a transmitting trail cam on a place that's actively an illegal dump on public land, this would prevent me from doing it. So I think you guys are totally out in left field doing what you're doing. Thank you.
For the record, Tom Casanelli with Humboldt County Game Board. We supported the department's recommendations with a vote of 3-1 opposed, 1 opposed. Everybody there at our meeting has trail cams. There was a lot of issues brought up. There was the issues of the counties. Some counties should be excluded from this and go with the major sheep units and elk units. But in the long run, we supported it. One of our members has a pilot's license, and he goes, what's the difference of me flying my plane and seeing an animal and then going back and harvesting it, or putting it on a trail cam? And that really kind of brought it into focus. You know, we have laws for the purpose of hunting using these cameras. What is the difference between having a camera out and him flying over with his plane and seeing an animal and then going back and hunting it? We have that law. It's against the law now. And I just wanted to bring that up for everybody to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Mr. Chairman, before my time starts, I'd request that I be allowed 6 minutes to represent my organization's views on this. We are opposed to trail cameras used by hunters. They are killing ethical big game hunting in Nevada. And let me read some changes in this regulation. I thought that it would improve it. 2 sub 4, I don't think we need that exception, employee of an industry with consultation. If we do keep it, I think we should add, except for organizations that auction big game tags and based upon written request and written approval. I think you need a paper trail to avoid the appearance of favoritism as a safeguard. And then in number 2C, monitor livestock, etc., I think you should add, unless the owner is a beneficiary of landowner tags. I want to remind this body that ranchers, etc., monitor game at water holes because they sell their landowner tags for large dollars, and therefore they could abuse this regulation. And I handed out, I'm going to hand out, did we hand those out? I handed out some handouts here, and if you look at Exhibit 1, the technology, Bushnell, and it says cameras sends images to your smartphone, email, app, or website. Control your trail camera with your device from wherever you are. Daily GPS location monitoring. What technology? And in Exhibit 2, it talks about commercialization of our wildlife. GPS is for sale. And it makes a point, for years, finder's fees made common in governors and auction tags. It's a big problem. We're talking about money. And if you go to Exhibit 3, it shows that this is happening in Nevada. It shows how cameras are used to shoot animals. And this one is a big buck deer with a trail camera, and it was shot afterwards. And so this is not an educational magazine. This is a hunting magazine that this appears in. And if you go to Exhibit 4, Field and Stream, it shows readers how to kill large animals using trail cameras. It just, it tells 12 steps on how to kill animals with trail cameras. And that's what's happening with trail cameras. And I don't think you need that 2 sub 4 exceptions for employee at any time. But what is happening is private NGOs or other persons don't need cameras to monitor guzzlers, which is why that was put in. They're monitoring animals is what they're doing. And it's real easy to sell that information. And I want everyone to hear this, and let me tell you how it works. Last week at the sheep show, What tags sold for? The New Mexico Rocky sheep sold for $165,000. The New Mexico Desert tag sold for $270,000. The Montana Rocky sheep tag sold for $340,000. The California Desert sheep sold for $200,000, plus a 5% buyer's premium. To get big dollars for your state tag, you need big animals. What better way to take a picture of a big animal and send the picture or GPS to Houston or wherever? NGOs that auction big game tags use trail cameras information to show big animals to potential buyers to sell these tags. That is why state wildlife agencies overlook this process, because it gives big money when they sell these. And NGOs ask, what will this do with the governor's tag? I've heard that asked many times. Well, my answer is, what about wildlife? Which I'm supporting wildlife first. These people who spend this kind of money have got to know the animal they are spending these big dollars for has to actually exist. Common sense. They don't buy the tag on a come. They have to know beforehand that kind of sheep or animal is there before they put these large sums up. Furthermore, the person who can find the largest animal in the state will get a $10,000 or even more finder's fee, or they can even sell the GPS coordinate to these guys. These guys talk big bucks. There's a lot of money if you show a big dollar guy that wants to buy a tag where there's a big animal. And trail cameras are the key to locating big animals. Guarantee. This isn't hunting anymore with this use of trail cameras. And I support this trail camera regulation with exceptions, but where it's being abused is people are selling that information. And the NGOs go out and get the information from the state agencies, and I would welcome any questions anyone has on that.
Any questions for Mr. Lent?
Thank you.
Do you have one, Commissioner Valentine? Yeah, of course. Dr. Lent.
Mr. Lent.
Excuse me for leaving.
But, so you're in favor of the camera regulation? Is it?
Yes, we are, because it's ruining hunting. And I'd like to see the people that are using the cameras are using it for hunting. And at the public comment period, I'm going to bring up a law that Wyoming has in effect. It's in the legislature now that we're going to be bringing up to our legislature, legislate it. It's going to cover everything here, but I'll bring it up, and I don't think I have the time to do it now, but we're for this regulation of banning trail cameras with those exceptions of federal agencies that need them to monitor certain things, but not for hunting purposes in any way, shape, or form. And ranchers use them for hunting purposes. Landowner tags, a friend of mine buys an elk tag if he can buy one for $12,000, and ranchers are selling the information too. And it's really ruining the sport of hunting.
I was just getting a little confused as to whether or not he was for or against the item, especially when you were talking about the NGOs and the permitting process.
I didn't hear that.
Were you insinuating that perhaps people that work within the NDOW organization might be attempting to sell the information?
No, I'm not doing that.
Okay.
I'm saying that people, NGOs, that they can go out and if they get a permission to do it, they monitor not the water, because we have a GPS map made out by the Department of Wildlife, and there's a statute that says that anyone that puts a water development up has to put their name, address, and phone number down there. So every hunter in the state that goes out and uses GPS map, they can relate back the condition of a guzzler if they want to. We don't need GPS. Those organizations go out and monitor these guzzlers because the public can do it themselves. And they're the ones that have the potential to sell the information. Anybody that goes out and looks at a guzzler has the potential. I'm not saying NDOW would do it. No, I'm not saying that. But private organizations have the ability to do it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lent. Further public comment in Reno?
My name's Keith Montez. I'm representing myself, but I am an outfitter. And I want to speak for the majority of the outfitters. We're not all unethical. We are ethical. I've been running trail cameras for 20 years. I have 40 of them. I enjoy doing it. It's more of a hobby for me, honestly, than a business. But hunting is always going to be business. There's too much money in it. He's right. How are you going to stop it? I look at your exemptions here. Livestock users can use them. You have outfitters that are livestock people. So now they have an unfair advantage over the other outfitters. Is that what I'm hearing? There's a lady in my county. She likes to take pictures of wild horses. She cares less about hunters. You going to limit her? You're going to tell her she can't do it anymore? Is that what we're doing? This is crazy. I look at what happened in Lincoln County. I look at what happened in Ely. There's a reason I don't go into those counties, because ethically I couldn't do that. Honestly, just being upfront and honest. But I still deserve the chance, or I still deserve, because I think I was raised in America, I should be able to go out and put a trail camera on a water hole. I think I should be able to do that. I've been doing it for 20 years. Should I put 50 of them on it? I don't think so. I wouldn't do that ethically. I can tell you from my experience, I stayed away from those counties, but I've gone all the way down and run trail cameras down into, all the way down to the Las Vegas area. Yeah, I'll see 4, 5, 6 trail cameras there. But let me tell you, those people, when they go in there, and I'm one of them, I've gone into those guzzlers and I've seen where the water's washed up and blocked the dam and ruined the drinker. We know there's a shovel at the tanks. We go, we clean it, we fix it. We monitor things. Having people to hike back into those guzzlers is not a bad thing. We're not all bad. We should be working together with a regulation that works for everybody. But if you're going to start special exemptions, I go, okay, well, most of the Department of Wildlife hunts. They can go put a trail camera out, but I can't? I don't know. You guys are going to tell me, oh, trust them. Have you watched the news about trusting our government? I don't think so. I think it's got to be fair for everybody. And I'm not here to tell you yay or nay or how to fix it, because I don't agree with what's going on in Lincoln County one bit. I think it's ridiculous with all those trail cameras. I think it's ridiculous in Ely. But I'm looking at your exemptions, and I really question them. Private landowners, they're outfitters too. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think we should limit people on placing trail cameras out there. I think it's a hobby for a lot of people. I think there's people out there that I've run into that have nothing to do with hunting. There's too many ways around this. All I got to do is go find a friend that's not a hunter, a wife, a grandmother, whatever, and he comes and tells me, hey, that's your trail camera? No, it's my wife's. And people will work around this. And not every outfitter's good. They'll find a way. The good ones, such as myself, if you tell me I can't do that, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to follow the regulation to the T. But there's going to be people that work around it, and I don't think that's right. I think you need to table it and really step back and look at it and go, we need a better answer, because you do. Because looking at that, they're going to find ways around it. The ethical ones won't. The ones that aren't are going to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Keith. Further public comment in Reno?
Let me move this down a little bit. Hi, I'm Jeff Howden. I'm here to represent myself. I'm an avid hunter, bow hunter, born and raised in Nevada. I am totally against this regulation. I feel that cameras are used for hunting, monitoring land, monitoring water, art, watching animals. I'm just going to jump around a little bit. If we are having issues in certain units, certain counties, I think we need to look at those certain units in certain counties. We're putting this regulation on the entire state. We don't have elk in Reno. We don't have elk on Peavine. We don't have elk in Lovelock. We have them back east, up north. I think we can limit the amount of cameras that can be put on guzzlers. I think there's IDs you can put on your cameras. I mean, those pictures that he had, I agree. 30, 40, 20, 5 might be too many. Nobody knows how many too many are. But there's different things we can do from going from black to white. I think there's a gray and a brown in between. If you guys think, if he thinks, if law enforcement thinks 10 cameras is too many, let's limit to 20 or limit to 2. Say anything over 2, you can't put a camera on. It has to be visible. It has to be ID'd. Fishing game, you guys show up, you see a camera, there's 3 on it, take them all. As long as they're visible, hunters, guides, onlookers, art people, I mean, I don't even know where to go. I disagree with this. I think exemption should be none. Either it's all across the state or none. Fishing game, they get to use cameras. They use them on mines, they use them on guzzlers. Those pictures sell. They get talked about. They're on social media. They're text. I've seen them. I've been involved in them. I know it happens. The 300-foot setback. You guys don't want them. They don't want them point blank at water holes. You're going to put 30 cameras on a trail, and they're still going to take a picture 2 feet away. I don't think that 300-foot setback is going to matter. I really don't. You're going to move everything that's happening at the water hole back 300 feet. You're going to get the same pictures. The dates, August 1st through the 31st, I don't think there should be any dates. Like a lot of people said, it's used for art, it's used for school, it's used for hunting, it's used for scouting, it's used for many reasons. I don't think anybody should be able to tell us how we use a camera. It's been said before, you can sit in a blind and shoot an antelope. You can sit in a blind and take a picture, but I can't put a camera on a water hole? I disagree with it. That's all.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Gary Coleman. I live in Pershing County, and I'm here representing myself, and I'm also an outfitter. And as far as the heritage tags, those guys are spending a lot of money on one tag. And whether you agree with it or not, the sole purpose of that tag was to raise money for wildlife. That's the reason, that tag was brought about. So for those guys to buy that tag and then you tell them, well, you're restricted on your camera, even though you paid that much money, you can't find one of the larger animals in the unit. That's it's going against what they're trying to do with the tag, because the whole point of the tag is to raise that money for wildlife. So limiting them on that issue just doesn't make any sense. So, and the other thing is, there's always going to be a way around these exemptions. There's so many different people with so many different angles. They're all going to look for that angle. So, you can't really exempt people. You're going to just have all or nothing, in my opinion. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. My name is Kyle Davis. I am here today representing the Nevada chapter for backcountry hunters and anglers. Our chapter has provided the Commission with a letter that outlines our concerns, so I'll just briefly touch on these. We support the regulation in part, and in other parts have some requested modifications. There's been a lot of discussion about the exclusion time periods. Our board voted that we support the prohibition of live action game cameras during the hunting season. We didn't necessarily go as far as to ban them outright during the hunting season, but we do support the prohibition of live action cameras. We believe that's a fair chase issue, and that makes a lot of sense to do so. With the issue of prohibition on trail cameras near water sources, we do support the regulation of proposed 300-foot prohibition. I think that stays with restrictions on camping and vehicle disturbance near the springs, but would hope that we continue to look at the research on this and continue to reevaluate that, but we think that makes a lot of sense. And I know I wasn't able to be here on the previous regulation. I just point to our letter on shed antler regulation. We support that one as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Steve Marcus again. This was one of the other major topics at our meeting, and we are in total support of the limitations or restrictions on the cameras. First off, commercialization. People from Utah coming in and selling coordinates online, can't have it. Everybody's talking about springs. It's not only springs, there's travel corridors where people are building wings to funnel animals through these corridors. So it's just not springs, it's everything. Damage to private property, drilling into water tanks, drilling into their fence posts. They're mounting cameras everywhere. And we realize it's not going to be perfect, and it's going to have to be tweaked, but we need a starting point. We need to start something. As far as the exemptions, the problem I see with well, it's not a problem. I think we could fix it. Any person who uses a camera in consultation with the department, I think we should have that 1 year restriction on dissemination of any information that was retrieved off that camera. Yeah, it's the same as with what NDOW does. Everybody at that meeting was in total agreement with us. We actually had, I think, 6 sub-guides there, and there was 3 master guides that were not there, but they expressed their opinions. They are for the restrictions. It's just getting out of hand in White Pine County. I can't speak for the rest of the state. Lincoln and White Pine County, I have seen the impact and the problems that it's caused, so your consideration will be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment in Reno?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. My name is Greg Smith. I'm representing myself as a sportsman. I believe in this. I think it's a good thing, personally. The only issue I see is your last one, monitoring livestock. I think enforcement is going to have a real tough time if they come up on a spring, and I picture northern Washoe, very few guzzlers there, but mostly springs and seeps, things like that. Who or how will they determine if it belongs to a livestock person or a friend of a livestock person? There will be cameras there. We all know that, but it's going to put something on enforcement that's going to be difficult, I think. I don't know how you get around that, but that's the biggest problem I see in this whole process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment in Reno? Okay, seeing none, we'll take it to Las Vegas. Public comment in Las Vegas?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have public comment.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. My name is David Dixon. I'm from Las Vegas. I'm just speaking for myself. This has been very educational today. I would like to mention that I oppose the proposal of restricting the cameras. One of my concerns is the rationale, what appears to be the rationale for using, or coming up with the reason to ban cameras. In your report, your notice of intent to act on the regulation, you state that one of the reasons to implement this was to improve the reputation of the guiding industry. To me, that speaks to the fact that you're attempting to regulate based upon emotion as opposed to science. And there's been lots said today about whether there's science that causes or that supports the use of cameras and how it might affect wildlife. My other point would be the concerns about enforcement. I don't know how you'd get around those particular issues. They're very complicated. And my last point has to do with the taking of the animals. You issue a certain number of tags for a particular area. There may be tons of cameras in a particular location, but you still have the same limit on the number of tags issued for that particular area. I can't see how the use of the camera is going to affect that particularly. Yes, there might be perhaps more animals taken, but you've already issued a certain number of tags for that particular area. So I don't see that the use of cameras is going to have any impact on that whatsoever. I do use cameras. Again, I'm just speaking for myself, but I don't use them excessively. I can see where that can be a major concern. Maybe something I might support would be perhaps the restriction of having cameras on your man-made guzzlers. If you want to restrict them in some way, perhaps not allow them there, but it's very difficult for me to see how you'd be able to enforce a camera on some faraway spring or natural guzzler somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment in Las Vegas?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Jana Wright for the record. I'm speaking in support of the regulation with the following changes. Under Section 2A, delete number 4 and delete number C. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jana. Further public comment in Las Vegas?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Mark Edgel of Las Vegas, Nevada, speaking strictly for myself. And I'm a 50-year resident of Nevada. I'm an outdoorsman, father of 6, all of which have hunted and fished in Nevada, all born in Nevada. Just a side note, hey, thank you very much for that youth tag program. That was awesome. My last 3 children really got to enjoy that. We had a great time, a lot of fond memories. You know, I like the trail cam. I own a whole 2 of them. And as pointed out in further discussion, earlier discussion in 11B, getting the millennials out there, that can be a real challenge, especially because there's no Wi-Fi. So when I take my kids out, placing these trail cameras is a lot of fun because we have an opportunity to get the SD card out and see what's happening. We've even set them up just take pictures of chipmunks because the little 4-year-old, he really thinks that's exciting. See the little chipmunks come in and get the peanut butter off of the rock. You know, you're taking an opportunity for us to go out there and enjoy our children and our grandchildren, and you're regulating it to where it's very difficult. I could see that there could be a challenge in some of the counties. Maybe you should address those. But just to openly ban trail cameras during the hunting season is you're taking poor 4-year-old's heart, you're breaking his heart there. And I say, I'm sorry, I can't put this camera out. I'm breaking the law. You know, a lot of questions would be how vague this is. So if I point the camera in another direction, even though it's in the 300 feet, am I not breaking the law? So I just got to turn it so it's not facing the water. Am I okay there? And then here in the southern Nevada area, a lot of our guzzlers and our springs are very seasonal. They're dry. And so if I'm pointing the camera still at this particular was once a spring is now dry, am I breaking the law? I mean, if we're going to outlaw trail cameras, outlaw them for everybody, even the Department of Wildlife. You know what? If we got to go out there on our own and see what's going on, let's everybody go out there on our own. Because once you start making exceptions, there's going to be people getting around it. They're going to be selling pictures illegally. That's just my opinion, but thank you much.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment?
That concludes comment in Las Vegas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. With that, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission for further discussion and a motion.
Chairman Grant, I guess what I'm hearing is that this issue has become a area-wide issue in my mind. Those darn eastern counties creating problems again. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels, but it may need to be discussed a little bit more as far as reducing it down to a county-wide restriction.
Vice Chairman Johnson, do you have something?
Well, I don't know about the county by county thing. I think it's hard to say. We're not going to let people use trail cams to hunt in White Pine and Lincoln County, but it's okay to use a trail cam to hunt anywhere else in the state. Because part of this is we've talked about this and about, I think we started, can't use a trail cam for purposes of hunting. Well, then that leaves open an issue. But what I really heard today was there's a problem. Just don't interfere with my use of trail cameras, because it's everybody else that's creating the problem. And I guess I'm being blunt again and forthright, as I often am, but all the comments I heard for those opposed to this was saying, yeah, there's a problem, regulate the problem, just don't interfere with my use of trail cameras because I'm not the problem. And that was, I heard it time and time and time again. And I think we've worked on this. I'm willing to listen again, but that was the message I seemed to hear
through public comment. No one is denying something needs to be done, or there needs to be some sort of framework around the abuse of trail cameras. I'm willing to look at this and try to tweak it. I don't think going county by county or some region is the right way to go. And I don't know if putting in there for purposes of hunting just creates a problem, but, you know, and then I hear, well, how are you going to enforce this? There's a lot of laws out there that are nearly impossible to enforce because of manpower issues, the vastness of the state, a lot of things. We rely on voluntary compliance. And I trust whatever we adopt, the overwhelming, vast majority of people out there are going to comply. Are there people going to try to skirt around it and get around it? That's a possibility. But it doesn't mean we should then say we're not going to address the problem. And I think there was a fair consensus that something needs to be done. So the question is what? And I think this regulation is a step in the right direction. And I think it's been considered a lot and thought through in a variety of ways. There also has to be some trust and faith in the department, and in particular, Chief Game Warden Turnipseed and his game wardens doing the right thing. And that with the ability to do projects and programs with approval from the department, because I'd like to get away from consultation, that a lot of the concerns we're hearing today can be addressed through that. You know, I doubt if, you know, I heard today, well, what if I put a trail camera up to see if anyone comes into my camp, because some people steal things from camps. Well, I suspect the trail camera is going to be gone if someone comes into your camp to steal things, but maybe not. So I hear all these arguments about this, and it's really trying to it's trying to skirt the problem, which everyone recognizes, so that everyone can keep their own trail cams as they see fit. And so I'd like to move in the direction with something. I thought this was a very good compromise in the sense it's limited to the August 1st through 31st year. And it doesn't preclude you from taking pictures. If you want to get out in the field and take pictures, nothing in this prohibits that. And that's because of how it defines a trail camera or similar device. So I've probably said too much and been a little too blunt, as I often am, so I'll stop now and listen to what the other commissioners have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnston. Commissioner Allenberg.
Yeah, I agree with Brad there. We've heard a lot of discussions already. The cabs in general have they've all agreed until this last time. And then Elko, in their cab meetings, they had public input that hadn't been there before, and they said, "Hey, wait a minute, we've been agreeing all along, and we've been part of the discussion. People show up, and now they want to stop it." And Elko, voted to oppose it, and so did Churchill County. But in general, the rest of the cabs discussions have all been about support. There's a problem, something needs to be done. A lot of the testimony today, nobody, acknowledges the fact that we're not totally banning it. They can still use it. We can still take our kids out and through the rest of the year. We're just trying to limit it. And maybe we have to limit it a little bit more. We still have exceptions in there for industry to go out through there to monitor their projects for scientific purposes, for industrial purposes, for whatever. There's still a process that we are allowing them to do that. As far as, there has been some discussions with the trappers using them to try to catch people that are messing with their traps. It's a legitimate thing, but as are all these issues are legitimate, but there is fundamentally a problem that we have to cure. And I don't think, yes, it's maybe the worst in Lincoln County and White Pine County, but the commercialization of our wildlife is statewide.
it needs to be addressed.
Further commission comments? Commissioner East.
Is my light on? Yeah, it is. I go back to what I think it was Rob brought from the archery community. Was it Rob or was it Jerry? It was Rob. Okay. I would actually like to see us move this to July to benefit the archers. And I am in support of the regulation.
I guess I had a question on that. I don't understand if you say beginning August 1st, and I think that's the earliest hunt starts August. July, when is it prior to that?
If I may, Mr. Chair, through you to Commissioner Johnson, I believe if you look at what you're proposing for seasons, I think we counted 13 archery seasons or archery times where it's in July, where the start date is in July, especially with antelope. And am I mistaken there? Or one of our cab members is the one who did that.
I could be wrong. I'm looking through the table now, and I always thought it was August 1.
Everything archery antelope is August 1.
I can go back and I think I have it noted in my notes, so I can see if I can find that.
I guess either way, I'd like to look at the archery seasons and let's just verify those if we can. I see August 1, 2 here for antelope, which is usually a little bit earlier.
I checked with Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed. I did check with Cody McKee from the Game Division, who's got the season tables in front of him, and he said, yeah, the earliest ones are August 1st. I believe Heritage is the same way, so there is a little bit of an issue that you could use a camera up until July 31st, but yeah, the hunts would start August 1st.
And I guess that was, I think what I heard of the concern with the bow hunters is they might be hunting in that August period, and their hunts were getting interfered with people coming out to put trail cameras out at that point in time.
Right.
So if you couldn't put the trail camera out starting August 1, that would coincide with the start of their hunting seasons. Mm-hmm. So that interference issue should be alleviated by that August 1 date.
Yeah. So I apologize. I thought it was July. So I'll rescind that request.
Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Tyler, going back to section 2 there, 2A, where it says a person who is acting within the scope of his or her official duties has clearly marked each trail camera or similar device to be used to indicate ownership, and jump down to 4, is an employee of any industry. So far all that works together, because an industry person would work in their official duties. You can see that, or any other person who uses a trail camera. So it's implying that any other person, what would their official duties be? I think I'm looking at the verbiage here, the wording, and how that fits back and forth, because you're trying to incorporate individuals here, people. Because I see something like was brought up with Joe when he mentions his kid out there doing, he's not part of an industry, but he's doing a project. Was the intent of this to kind of incorporate those types of scenarios? And what if somebody has a hobby and comes in and says, hey, you know what, I'd like to come in and, I'd like to go out and take my grandkid out and go do this, go do some trail cameras out here. What do I need to do to get a permit? Would they be eligible for that? Or you see where I'm headed with that?
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner McNinch. I think that's exactly right, and this language actually came from LCB, but But I think it functions, yes, in that broad umbrella that it could be Joe's son doing a high school project, or an NGO wanting to monitor a fence around a water development, or a drinker or something like that. It could be any person or organization. And as we talked earlier, we could probably do that through a SLAP process, special license and permit process. Again, I always hate to volunteer for new permits, but we've got 20 or 30 of them already, you know, falconers, dog trials, commercial, you know, everything. So we could add a special permit for that would, you know, a high school student in Lovelock could call us up and say, hey, I'm interested in doing a permit for a class project. Or Mel could call up and say, hey, you know, I want to look at how sheep are using these three guzzlers for this reason. I think that permit process could be sort of all-encompassing for anybody who's wanting to do it for the right reasons, I guess.
Vice Chairman Johnston.
I think Commissioner McNitch brings up a good point, but a very good point, especially when it talks about the individuals doing it in consultation with the department or approval of the department, that 2A subsection 4, I think it should just be its own subsection B. Because when I think of that, a person who's acting within the scope of his or her official duties, and then you see the employee or authorized agent of the state, of a municipal or county government, or the federal government, that's really to 1, 2, and 3, and that the employee of any industry or any other person, I don't think you need that official duties type language, because they're going to be doing it in connection with some approval or consultation with the department. I don't want to have a situation where someone's doing a project, student goes to the department says yes, and then there's really no official duty like a government employee. So my suggestion would be that the exemptions in section 2 would be 2A, 1, 2, and 3. 4 would be its own subsection B, and then you would just change the B and C to C and D.
And to clarify, Vice Chairman Johnston, would you want employee of any industry to also be in B, or would that still stay in subsection 4? And then split off the other person using with a permit?
That would probably work. The best way to do it would be to split off the any other person, make it that be an employee of industry. But that's not going to work either. Because right now, isn't being a hunting guide an industry? Yeah. So that's why I think when you look at 2A, where it's talking about within the scope of his or her official duties, it's really talking about the government employees doing things in that official capacity, whether it be an employee of the federal government, authorized agent of the state, and that the employee of the industry or any other person would be in consultation with the department or approval of the department. So the person is saying, I work for a mining company, we're going to put trail cameras on this particular area because we want to make sure wildlife isn't coming in to where there's a water with pollutants or contaminants in it. That to me is entirely, and my belief and recollection is that was what was trying to address there, and in specifically comments from the mining industry on that. But obviously we don't want to limit it to the mining industry, and therefore there might be others as well. So I still go back to my initial thing that it would be 2A would be in the scope of his or official duties when we refer to 1, 2, and 3, which are government employees. A new subsection B, an employee of any industry or any other person who uses the trail cameras or similar device, and as it reads now in consultation with the department, then the next section would just be relettered to C, and the final one would be relettered from C to D.
That makes sense to me. And would you want to change in consultation with the department to some language about a written permit?
I think I would be fine with approval from the department. So that it would simply read, any employee of any industry or any other person who uses the trail camera or similar device with approval from the department.
Yeah, and I suppose we could sort that out with LCB as to how they wanted that to look, as far as approval or consultation or special permit. Along those lines, I'm not, Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed again, on those governmental employees, I'm actually not sure of any municipal or county government that would need this exemption. I'm trying to think of an agency who would need trail cameras out on the landscape, and I don't know that 2 applies, but.
Further comments from the commission? Questions?
I'm afraid to.
Commissioner Allenberg.
Yeah, maybe a question for the department there. There have been with the questions about there's no scientific data that supports that we're harassing the wildlife, and testimony today that they're actually coming in and looking at cameras at the water site. Is there any way to do a study or to better define if we, or what are we doing to the animals? Are we disturbing? Are we not? Potentially what the exact impact is, if there is any, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Allenberg, and through you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if one of the other division folks would want to speak to that. I think it would be hard to study. You'd almost have to have cameras monitoring the effect of cameras. So I don't know how that would come about. And it sort of comes back to a philosophical argument of what's this designed to accomplish. When we talked with LCB about our authorities, or this board's authorities, it was sort of a two-pronged argument, one being fair chase for hunting, one being disturbance of the wildlife. I think you could probably focus more on that fair chase issue and less on the disturbance of wildlife issue by taking out the reference to 300 feet, the first subsection D, 300 feet from water, and then even the transmitting camera year-round. You could focus on just the August 1 to December 31st part, and that would sort of focus the regulation more in on the fair chase aspect of the hunt, and wouldn't have to worry so much about the actual disturbance of wildlife coming into the water hole. If you struck subsection C and subsection D and just talk about the hunts, then I think there's less of an argument there of our cameras disturbing wildlife, because we wouldn't be worried about the prior to July or prior to August 1st period. A person could still use cameras in whatever capacity they wanted the other 7 months of the year, whether it be on water, transmitting, whatever. I know that's kind of a shift from what we've been talking about, but there's two thoughts here, one being the fair chase argument and one being the disturbing wildlife as they come to water argument. If we don't want to address that second argument, we could just look at the fair chase aspect, which is covered in A.
Commissioner Barnes.
There we go. Tyler, I like what you just did right there, omitting C and D.
I tend to agree with that as well.
And that was to delete subsection C and D in section 1?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Chairman Wallace?
Yes.
With this regulation, it's been in front of the commission for a while, or it came out of LCB a while ago. If we make major changes to this regulation today, and I don't think either Dag Stockton, Woodbury, or myself could tell you what LCB would consider a substantial change. We could give you a guess, but if we make substantial changes, we can make little changes. But you could adopt something today that LCB thinks is a substantial change, and that would put us back to 0 again, and we would go through this process again. Just giving you a warning. I'm not telling you not to make substantial changes, but just letting you know that depending on where we end up today, we may do this again.
Commissioner Johnston.
Yeah, and I appreciate that comment, Deputy Director Rob. My view on that is I'd rather make the changes that we deem are appropriate, and if that delays the process, then that delays the process. But if we really feel that changes need to be made, you make the changes that need to be made and let the process fall out where it should.
I agree. I just wanted to put it on the record so in 2 months when we come back to you, say that was a good shot, but you didn't get it. We're going to start over. I didn't want to be accused of not telling you.
No, I think we're all well aware of that, and I appreciate that. I'm making clear what my view is on this process. I understand how it works, probably more so than I ever really wanted to understand how this process worked, but
If I don't know if, I don't want to, Chief Game Warden Tyler Turnipseed again, I don't want to be the one who leads this discussion. That's certainly in your guys' lap, but there was a lot of discussion about the exemptions and specifically the exemption for monitoring livestock use on a stockwater type spring. And so I hate to put Commissioner Barnes on the spot, and obviously you don't speak for cattlemen, you can't speak for every cattleman in the state, but I don't know if anybody else has an alternative to, address that concept that was brought up, that, a landowner or a cattleman who's also a guide, or, do you feel like that's a problem, or is that something that we've already covered?
Well, it's hard for me to say because I don't know everybody.
Sure.
I know there are, half for people that use it on, most of it is on stockwater wells, where they'll use that intermittently instead of having to drive out to actually check to make sure that the well and the pump are still working. They use that to make sure there's still water in the tank, so they don't have to go out.
That makes
every
sense.
second or third day. And, as far as Dr. Lennon, I think, mentioned it when he talked about, that landowners do get the tags. There again, it's ethics. What's there to stop? There probably isn't. It's ethics, but most of the time when you're going to be doing that, it's going to be in the heat of the summer when you're looking at that. I do know that there are other people that use those things more to monitor whether a gate is closed or not between BLM pastures. Because with so much traffic now out there and gates are getting left open, and the way our permits are written, you pretty much have to make sure your gates are shut all the time, and so that's something that a lot of people are starting to use those for now too. So I don't know if I answered your question or not. But.
No, that's good. Just food for thought.
Further discussion from the commission? Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if the thought is to remove C and D out of that first section, then would we need to consider under 1A moving that August 1st? In my mind, because if there's potential for transmission on July 31st, then it seems to me like we should consider moving that back to July 1. You see what I'm saying? Because if we have an open season on August 1 and now we're going to allow transmission of data, somebody could transmit data on the 31st. See what I'm saying? It's
Yeah,
Tyler for his thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioner McNinch. I think you could just wiggle back a week or 10 days and eliminate most of that benefit of a camera out the day before the season.
Further discussion? Anyone willing to attempt a motion?
I'll give it a shot, but
I saw you writing, so I figured you had something in mind.
So I would move to approve Commission General Regulation 440, LCB file number R012-16, as presented with the following changes. Under Section 1, the introductory statement under 1 remains the same. Subsection A remains the same. Subsection B remains the same. Subsection C would read, at any time during the period beginning July 1st and ending July 31st, if the trail camera or similar device transmits or is capable of transmitting images, video, or location data of wildlife. Omit subsection D. In subsection 2, A, 1, 2, and 3 remain as the same, with the exception that the or goes after subsection 2A2. Subsection 2A4 becomes subsection 2B. Subsection 2B would then be relabeled 2C, and subsection 2C would become 2D.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion by Commissioner Johnston with a second by Commissioner McNinch. Would Commissioner Johnston mind rereading section C?
Yeah.
Yeah. So subsection C would be at any time during the period beginning July 1st and ending July 31st. If the trail camera or similar device transmits or is capable of transmitting images, video, or location data of wildlife. And so the idea would be you keep the trail camera prohibition from August 1st to the 31st. The prohibition on transmitting cameras is just for that July 1 to July 31st period. But of course, a transmitting camera could not be used from August 1 to August 31. And my thought process on that then gives everyone many, many months of the year for hobbying, whether the camera transmits data or not. It addresses the hunting season and the period right up leading to the hunting season. Based upon all the public comments, my idea in making that motion is it's a good compromise that addresses the issue, allows for the appropriate type of exemptions. I need to make a modification to my motion. I would amend my motion that subsection 2A4, which will become 2B, would read, an employee of any industry or any other person who uses the trail camera or similar device with approval from the department.
Second's fine with that. I'm glad you caught that.
Okay, without restating it, is the commission clear with the motion? Okay, I'll call for the question. Go ahead.
I don't know, and Brad, I know where you're going, but would it be clear if under C, if we said at any time during July 1st to December 31st, if the trail cam or similar device transmits, would that be clearer for the general public if we included to December 31st?
That's fine with me too. I mean, it's going to be one way, 6 one way, half a dozen the other, but it is probably a little clearer that way. So I would amend my motion a second time so that subsection 1C would read at any time during the period beginning July 1st and ending December 31st if the trail camera or similar device transmits or is capable of transmitting.
And the second will be fine with that as well.
Okay, we've amended it twice. Is the commission clear with the final amendment to? No.
No.
Why don't we just start over?
All right.
I'll remove my second.
I'll withdraw my motion. I'm sure Tyler already understands why I don't want December 31st in that, so I'm going to try this again. Okay, I would move to approve Commission General Regulation 440, Trail Cameras and Other Devices, LCB file number R012-16, as presented with the following changes. The introductory language for Section 1 remains the same. Subsection 1A remains the same. I would change December 3rd. No, it's not going to work. Because we have hunting seasons that go into January.
We do.
So I guess I would live with it. I mean, if you're really trying to prohibit the use of trail cameras during hunting seasons and you have seasons that go into January, then don't you need to use it?
January 31st.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Johnston and Chairman Wallace. We do have seasons that go into January, but I think as the fall goes on, animal use of coming to water where a camera would be is less and less. You know, even I doubt there's a whole lot of animals hitting cameras in December. Although I was sheep hunting down in the Mormons this year and saw 6 cameras on a water source in December. But I think as the calendar year comes to a close, the significance of cameras in the hunt becomes less and less. You know, certainly early in the season, August, those animals are hitting water every day or every other day. September, in some areas, still hitting it every day. October. But by the time you get to December, even January, I think some of those animals probably don't water for weeks.
All right, then I'll
Continue.
I'll make my motion. So should I start over again? I'd move to approve Commission General Regulation 440, LCB file number R012-16, as presented with the following changes. The introductory language of Section 1 remains the same. Section 1A remains the same. Section 1B remains the same. Section 1C would read, at any time during the period beginning July 1st and ending December 31st, if the trail camera or similar device transmits or is capable of transmitting images, video, or location data of wildlife. Subsection 1D would be omitted in its entirety. Subsection 2A remains the same. 2A1 remains the same. 2A2, add or at the end. 2A3, delete the or. Subsection 2A4 would become subsection 2B, and then you would re-letter subsections 2B and C to 2C and D. And in subsection 2B, as it would be renumbered, would be any employee of any industry or any other person who uses the trail camera or similar device with approval from the department.
And I'll second that. And I do appreciate the motion. It's complicated. I don't think it's, in my mind, it doesn't necessarily address all the issues that I'm concerned with, but I suspect that we're all in that boat. And by the public comment that we took today, I think everybody in this room is going to be in the same boat on that one. But I do think that it's a reasonable approach to it, and if we need to make adjustments as we move forward for whatever reason that might be, I think that I'm comfortable moving forward, and I appreciate the conversation about it.
Is everyone clear with the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Okay.
Chairman Wallace, just a quick question. Chief Game Warden Turnipseed again, and maybe it's a question for Deputy AG Stockton, but specific to the exemption for industry or other person, and then with approval of the department, do you think we need to formalize that more by saying written approval or approval by permit or some sort of that sort of language?
It's Brian Stockton, Deputy Attorney General for the record. Obviously, that would be more clear, but I think it would limit the department where if it just says approval from the department, you'd have the flexibility and the discretion to decide how that approval would be issued and documented.
Great.
So, but
thank you.
It's up to you.
Okay. Everyone clear with the motion? Call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes unanimously, 7-0, with Commissioner Hubbs and Young still absent. With that, we'll close agenda item 13B and move to agenda item 14, Commission General Regulations Workshop. Public comment allowed. Persons wishing to provide comment on regulations are requested to complete a speaker's card and present it to the recording secretary. And
I thought we
we're going to be on 14B. And agenda item 14A was rescheduled. We will move to agenda item 14B, Commission General Regulation 476, Processing Fees, LCB file number R142-17, Data and Technology Services Division Administrator Chet Van Dellen. Workshop public comment allowed. The commission will hold a workshop to consider amending 502.118 of the Nevada Administrative Code. This regulation reduces the current convenience fee of $2 for residents and $3.50 for non-residents per item purchased online to a processing fee of $1 per item purchased regardless of residency and method of purchase. This fee change will reduce fees to individual customers while preserving the necessary means of paying the department's credit card processing charges. Mr. Van Dellen.
Thank you, Chairman Wallace, members of the commission. As you can see in the summary, currently customers are paying $2 for online application fees if they're a resident or applying for any product that's not a game tag application, and they're paying $3.50 if they are applying for a game tag application if they're non-residents. This fee is only imposed for online transactions, but moving into an online dominated sales workflow, we wanted to make that a little bit more fair to everyone. If we're forcing you to go online, we don't want to charge you more for that fee, so we want to reduce the fee to $1 for all customers, and we want to apply that fee to any transaction that the system provides, whether it's at the counter, at the agent, or online. So although more customers will be affected by the new fee, the actual fee goes down by at least half for residents and more than a third for non-residents. The fee change is intended to be revenue neutral. This money is intended to pay our credit card processing fees, and we only have one minor addition to what we're requesting. We wish to add the word non-refundable to the fee because we have to pay the credit card processing fee whether we reverse the transaction or not. So if we can keep the $1 to pay that credit card transaction fee that the department pays, even if we refund the license, we can still cover our costs.
And just for clarification, Chet, where did you want that non-refundable to be in the?
If you look at NAC 502.118, item 3, it says the department may charge and collect a fee of $1 for the processing of each license, permit, tag, certificate of ownership, certificate of number, or any other service provided by the department. We request that that change be the department may charge and collect a non-refundable fee of $1 and so on.
Questions for Chet? Okay. Seeing none, we'll call for public comment in Reno. Okay. Seeing no public comment in Las Vegas?
No public comments in Las Vegas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. I'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion. Any questions or comments? Deputy Director Rob.
If you guys think that this is worth going forward with, we are asking for a February 9th commission meeting. It would be a telephonic commission meeting to have the majority or a voting quorum of the board available to hopefully get this in place prior to the draw this year. We need to get a special commission meeting for this regulation to pass and get to ledge commission prior to the draw. That's why we're really trying to streamline this and get it going forward faster. We would have done it tomorrow, but we didn't have the posting. We didn't have the language back from LCB in time to meet the posting requirements of adoption tomorrow. That's why we would have to have a special meeting going forward.
Thank you for bringing that up, Deputy Director Rob. I kind of forgot about that. So, is any comments or questions on this? I don't know if I don't think we need to have any specific action on this, correct? It's going to move to that February 9th special. Okay. So seeing nothing further, we'll move it forward to the workshop with that non-refundable addition. With that, we'll close agenda item 14B and move to agenda item number 15, public comment period. Persons wishing to speak are requested to complete a speaker's card and present it to the recording secretary. No action can be taken by the commission at this time. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda.
Members of the commission, Mr. Chair, so I feel complied to apologize to each of you and to the general public for totally getting my information wrong on the issue with trail cams. So please accept my apology. What the testimony that was given to us, I misunderstood it. Apparently, the archery folks, I just checked with them for clarification on it. Apparently, their issue is that if you set the date for August 1st, they are in their stands and stuff the night before and days before, are setting their stands up and stuff the day before and days before, and everyone's trying to get in there to pull their cameras out before the August 1st, and so they felt that would be a detriment to scaring wildlife off of water holes, that sort of thing. So my apologies there. I'm glad it happened in front of you guys and not the legislature that I give testimony to quite a bit. So my apologies to the commission as well as the department staff and especially Chief Turnipseed for the misinformation there.
Thank you, Rob. Further public comment in Reno?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Gerald Lent with Nevada Hunters. This trail camera regulation, I feel doesn't go far enough. One is you can't camp within 300 feet, 100 yards of a spring or water. So why are you allowing cameras within 300 feet? Because the purpose of the no camping, you're disturbing wildlife. Well, cameras are going to disturb wildlife. So taking that out, I think, was a big mistake. And second, with permission of the commission, without having any paper trail, there's going to be no way the public can look for favoritism. There's got to be some kind of paper trail to avoid any sign of favoritism, and you didn't put that in there. And I think that because of the problems that we have selling wildlife, commercialization of wildlife, and selling GPS coordinates, I think we're going to do a bill in the legislature like Wyoming did. I'm going to read Wyoming's. And Wyoming has recently taken a stand against commercialized wildlife information to prohibit it. And this issue arose because individuals locate trophy class animals, take photos of them, collect their GPS locations, and sell the location to scouting devices or guides, which also provide additional service to help hunters find the animals during hunting season. And I'm just going to read a sentence of this since I have time. And it says, no person shall advertise or provide to a hunter for remuneration the location and identification information of any previously scouted big or trophy game animal for the purpose of aiding the hunter in taking of that specific previously scouted big or trophy game animal. For the purpose of this subsection, location identification information means, 1, the geographical coordinates of the location of the animal or any maps, drawings, illustrations, or other documents which show the location of the animal, and 1, photographs, drawings, descriptions, or other information which identify the animal. Now that bill, I don't care if you have drones, trail cameras, wildlife personnel, this tells no person, even department personnel, can give information out on the location of a trophy animal. And I think this covers everything. You don't need all these trail cameras and drone regulations if you have a regulation like this. And I think that this is going to be tried to put it in statute, because I think this is what really needs to be done to eliminate this commercialization of wildlife. The trail camera is just a drop in the bucket, but a regulation like this would cover everything on any information, anybody giving information out, from landowners to anybody. This would cover it, and I think this would be a good law like Wyoming's had the problem, and I think we got the problem in Nevada, commercialization of wildlife, and I think this is one way to solve it, and it'll probably have to be done in a statute, NRS. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lent. Further public comment in Reno?
Rex Flowers, representing myself. It was brought up at our county cab the other night. I heard a whisper of this back in November. We no longer have a tag result posted online because we have certain fraction groups that may or may not harass individuals who are successful in certain draws. This is not going to stop that harassment. If that harassment exists, it's going to continue because of the Freedom of Information Act. I know the department made this decision on their own, but I would ask you to give consideration, to give direction back to the department at a future time about reinstating tag results online. People don't look at it for what they have, but for what their friends have, whether they be from in-state or out of state. It's just a part of who we are and what we've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Rex. Further public comment in Reno?
My name is Kathy Brandhorst, and I'm also the United States President. I am the trainer. I trained all the animals myself. They're all mild and meek. They are not dangerous animals at all. You don't come into our city and shoot them down. That's going to be pinned against you for murdering a mild and meek animal. They have already been trained for the circus for people to enjoy, not for you to go into circus and shoot them down. You have no right to be shooting down pets in the neighborhoods either. You go into our neighborhoods and you carry your machine guns and shoot them down. They're mild and they're meek because they have already been trained. You don't do that, not even in the city, shooting down animals, walking down the street. You don't shoot that animal. If you do, I hope you get charged for shooting down mild and meek and tamed animals. Animals are permitted to go to McDonald's to have lunch. They have their own money. They pay for it too. You don't go in there and shoot them down, do you? I hope not, because this is the only way that you're here in our area, our Reno, and shoot them down in McDonald's because they can pay for their own food. You know, I don't want you people here, if that's why you're here, to shoot down our pets. They're not wild. They're not in the wildlife. They're not even, permitted to be shooting or even, you called it hunting in our area, our downtown. Well, you better take it somewhere else because Nevada doesn't have this. We don't have nobody shooting down our animals because they're in the park. You do. You take a gun and you shoot down all the birds because you're hungry. Why don't you go to the supermarket and get the bird out of the supermarkets? You don't have no right to shoot them down. Is that why you're here? These pets are only for public to watch, the public to
Ma'am.
see.
I hate to interrupt you, but we only allow 3 minutes for public comment. Thank you. Next public comment in Reno.
Mel Belding, Washoe County. I'd just like to say the same thing that Rex said. I'd like to be able to view what we have in the past, why the change was made. Whoever it was made by, I think, was the wrong decision, but I enjoy going through there and seeing who got what. So I think there should be, I think it should be reinstated. Thanks.
Thank you, Mel. Further public comment in Reno?
Carl Urquiaga again, from Churchill County. I apologize for belaboring the trail camera thing, but I'm not sure. I want to clarify the motion. I would have asked the question earlier, but there's no opportunity for that. So you approved using transmitting trail cameras for December 31st through July 15th, or something like that, correct? Is that correct?
July 1st. It was July 1st, correct?
That's the, transmitting trail cameras is the one thing we all agree on that shouldn't be allowed, including Boone and Crockett. Mr. Turnipseed had Boone and Crockett's some quotes up there earlier. What he didn't put was that live transmit trail cameras is the only position Boone and Crockett takes. They don't take a position on regular trail cameras. But thank you.
Further public comment in Reno? Seeing none, I'll, one more. No problem.
Jeff Howden for the record. I am a bow hunter, as I said. You guys approved August 1st through December, or up to August 1st for trail cameras. I disagree with what was commented earlier about other hunters coming into the field while bow hunters are ready to hunt. I put out trail cameras. I do it every year for numerous type of animals. I've never had anybody come in and try and put a trail camera up during my hunt, 2 days before my hunt, 3 days before my hunt, a week after my hunt. So I disagree with that. I feel if we go any further with trail cameras or regulating trail cameras, the impact on the animal and the impact on the land will be higher. Instead of placing a trail camera and checking it every 2 to 3 weeks, now you're gonna have sportsmen, hunters, hobbyists coming out, driving those roads, eroding your roads, pushing animals off the water holes constantly. I can tell you firsthand that if you ban or do any more regulations to the trail cameras, instead of me placing the cameras, I will be driving to those water holes weekly, daily, bi-weekly. Every time somebody drives up, they're pushing animals off the water holes. That's it.
Thank you, sir. One last call for public comment in Reno. Seeing none, I'll take it to Las Vegas for public comment.
Yes, we've got public comment.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Greg Anderson from the Wapabana Paiute Chairman, Tribal Chairman. I was just liking to speak on behalf of the tribe to see about getting our hunting rights. I'd like to start with the story I have is that our tribe was, ancestral land was 2.3 million acres in 1874, reduced down in 1874 also to 1,000 acres. And which at that time they took our land, took our hunting and our rights away from us, I think. And then 1970-something, they gave us an additional 70,000 acres. And what I'd like to do, the bighorn sheep is actually one of our people's highly prized animal. And actually, according to our legends, the bighorn sheep was born on
Mormon Mountains. And so our people were in, I'd say, in the starving age, and at that time starving. So according to our legends, the sheep had sacrificed their life to our people, and in return we honored them with song and dance. So to this day, we are out of balance when it comes time for the sheep and the deer, because in certain of these mountains that are called like the Sheep Mountain Range here, there's the petroglyphs over there that we have on that talk about where we went into that mountain as people, and we came out of that mountain as sheep when we have our puah, and they call that means power in our language. So I was just wondering about what we need to do to get our license. We would like to have 10 tags if we can in our ancestral areas, and also 10 in the deer. So I was just wondering what we need to do to accomplish something like that.
Is that the end of your comment?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment in Las Vegas?
Yes.
So that would be it?
That's it?
Yes, Mark Edgel, Las Vegas, Nevada. I had a suggestion. On the muzzleloading hunts, which I really have enjoyed, I purchased a 50 caliber Scout pistol, which contains the same muzzle velocities of a rifle. And I have often wondered if I could use that to hunt, because I can put up to 110 grains of powder in it, shoot a round ball, but I'm not certain if I can utilize it to take hunting as a muzzleloader in the muzzleloading season. But if it doesn't, I'd like to see clarification that if a pistol could maintain the same capabilities of hunting as a rifle, it should be able to be used. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment in Las Vegas?
No, that concludes our comment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll bring it back to Reno, and we will stand adjourned till tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. Thank you.